Network-based firewalls. The first and obvious place to have a network-based firewall is on your router. Some of the high-end routers may come with some good firewall functionality, and the low-end routers that you buy may have limited or no firewall functionality at all. One of the reasons for using custom firmware that we went through, like OpenWRT and DD WRT on routers, is to get access to a more configurable firewall. And I'm talking about IP tables here. We see here OpenWRT using our friend IP tables, which we discussed already in the video on Linux host firewalls. So OpenWRT uses IP tables. And here we have DD WRT also using IP tables. We will use DD WRT to discuss and demonstrate router-based network firewalls during this video. Routers like this with custom firmware may provide you with enough firewall functionality for your needs, but are generally configurable mostly if you want most of the power out of them via the command line. Here is what you can do with the GUI in DD WRT. It provides some limited functionality to enable and disable IP tables. And if you go down here, you can see some additional functionality. You can add additional filters, proxy, cookies, Java applets, ActiveX out of the traffic, which is kind of useful, but obviously won't work with encryption as it doesn't break the encryption, and we want to use encryption all the time anyway, so it really limits that. You got some WAN blocking that you can do here, which again is pretty limited, and you've got some brute force protection. There's a connection warning notifier where you can get sent messages about certain events, which is kind of useful, and you've also got logging. You can set the log level, low, medium, or high, and then whether you want to enable or disable that logging for that particular chain, the chains which we have gone through, so drop, reject, and accept. All of this is configurable normally through IP tables. This is just a GUI to simplify the process. In the example of DD WRT, if you want to edit your firewall any more than that, or IP tables, you have the option of coming to administration and then commands, and then you can enter essentially IP table commands here and then save those commands, and those commands will run when you start the router. Or alternatively, of course, you can log into the router via SSH and do IP tables. You will, of course, need to get to grips with IP tables in order to do that. And do make sure you don't lock yourself out of the administrative interfaces when you're fiddling with IP tables. That will be a problem. And for DD WRT, as that's what we're demoing here, you can see an example of some of the commands that you can put into this box here, which is supplied by DD WRT, just some examples. And there's also a page on how to use IP tables in combination with DD WRT. And other custom router firmware will be similar, as of course IP tables is the same on all of them. If you're looking for a GUI for IP tables on your router, you could look at using Firewall Builder, which is a third-party firewall GUI that you would run on a separate machine, a separate PC or device, which will manage the IP table rules on the router, and it does it remotely via SSH, and it supports Mac, Windows, and Linux. This page here gives you some more information of how to use it with DD WRT, and this is the home page for Firewall Builder. Download, install it, and you'll find it much easier to configure your firewall than perhaps using IP tables if you're not familiar with it. There's also videos here on how to use it. So that's an option as well for you. If you saw the video on host-based Linux firewalls, I also mentioned some other GUIs for IP tables, but this one in particular works with DD WRT well.